I think that it's wonderful how many women are in the workplace and the many, many challenges that we face getting here. We're usually the primary caregivers at home. If you're a mom, you've got 27 different thoughts racing through your head every day in addition to coming to the office. And it's really sometimes very hard to juggle it.
It's a constant source of anxiety, and it's just something I don't know how to deal with, and I see people around me dealing with it better. I don't manage that very well. I mean, what I do manage really well, I think, is I draw a line at a certain point in the day to carve out to make sure I have with my husband and my two children. And that is my sacred time. I'm really good at that. I'm really good at kind of protecting my weekends and protecting time with them on holiday. But, all those habits of after everybody they go to bed, my little ones, I'll pick it up then. I'm not very good at kind of not having, just saying that's not that important, let it go. That's one of my major challenges. I just don't know how to deal with that because everything's important in my mind. And to me, to be good, you have to do everything at 100%, but that's wrong because whenever you speak to all the coaches, it's the 80-20 rule. And so I have to battle that.
As I get older, I'm better at being kinder to myself and saying, I am not in a position to do this today. There's too much going on. I always felt like I had to be Johnny on the spot constantly. I couldn't ever decline a meeting. I could not express any concern I was taking on too much. I felt like whatever was given to me, I just took it on. And that does not translate into a good work-life balance. In fact, it makes you ineffective. It can make you bitter, and that can come out in your performance and in your work.
Balance implies that you have it equipoised, kind of demands, and that's just not how it works. In my experience, it's a constant seesaw. You're going, the kids, I have 5 kids over the years. They've been, sometimes they're taking up more of my time. Sometimes work is taking up more. Sometimes you definitely feel like you're not doing any of it well. And so you shift a little and put a little more into one side, a little more into the other. I don't think balance is the right word, but I do think we have to understand, maybe juggling is the word. Balance puts a little too much pressure, I think, on us.
I recently was talking to a friend that said work-life balance is very difficult, but when you feel like you're putting in more than what you're getting out, you need to fix something. And I am right now trying to fix that. I'm putting a lot more in than I'm getting out, so there's that balancing act that you have to do, and feeling confident around what impact that may have for you at work. And that goes back to that first point about managing the expectations that others have of you and just being very clear about it from the very beginning. I think if you do that paired with the work-life balance effort of what you put in is what you get out, I think you will be your best self. So it's an art, and it's something I think we all need to work at every day.
Good afternoon and welcome to our final session. I'm Stacey Olivares and I serve on the CalPERS Board of Administration. It's such a pleasure to be here to talk with these very accomplished women. I'm joined by 5 Sacramento area executives who each have their own story to tell of becoming an accomplished leader in their fields. I'll introduce them one by one and then we'll start the discussion. Donna Bland is president and CEO of Golden One Credit Union. She's been working in the banking and finance industry for 25 years and has served on advisory committees and boards of directors along the way. Her top priority as CEO is to focus on customer service and support in order to create stronger communities in the region. Ms. Bland is one of only 2 women at the helm of a top 10 credit union in the United States. Next is Carolyn Coleman, Executive Director and CEO for the League of California Cities. Ms. Coleman has a wealth of experience on the national stage, representing city leaders and 49 state municipal leagues throughout the country to advance their priorities before Congress, the White House, and the courts. She's also served as deputy mayor for the city of Indianapolis, where she focused on economic development, infrastructure, and community engagement. We also have Doreen Dominguez, chairwoman and CEO of Banner Group of Companies, a commercial construction and real estate development firm with more than 400 employees in 17 regions across the United States. In addition to running her company, she plays a significant role in the industry by serving on corporate boards such as CIT Group, KB Home, and the Coca-Cola Hispanic Advisory Council. Kate Renwick Espinosa is president of VSP Vision Care, the company's first female president in this role. In her work, she oversees the operational, strategic, and profit and loss responsibilities of the insurance side of the company. Having been with VSP for more than 30 years, she has participated in helping the company grow from an insurance company serving 3 states to a global company involving retail, manufacturing, and insurance that covers 90 million people worldwide. Rounding out our panel is Mary Teichert, president of Teichert Inc. In her time with Teichert, she worked her way up through the ranks, gaining leadership experience along the way in various roles, including general manager and chief operating officer. Mary's professional experience extends to service on the boards of the California Building Industry Association, the California State Contractors Licensing Board, and as a gubernatorial appointee to the State of California Public Works Contract Arbitration Committee. That's just to name a few. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. To get us started, I would like to hear from Donna first, and then we'll go around about your journey into leadership.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I also want to say thank you to CalPERS for this opportunity. It is events like this that gave me the motivation that I needed as I also went through my journey to become what I am today in my career. So thank you very much. And welcome to everyone who's here for today's panel. This question about my journey to my position of leadership, I'd say it's very much foundational to my identity and who I was or who I am. And it's based on how I grew up. You know, independence, hard work, perseverance is a big part of my journey. So I'm going to share that part because that really is the foundation for then my journey through my career. I come from a family of 4 kids. I grew up in San Francisco, very independent, 2 working parents. My father was retired military, high school education. My mother was an immigrant with English as a second language and did not complete her high school education. And so, you know, that sort of is foundational for determining, you know, where I thought I wanted to be in my life and the hard work and perseverance that I needed to put in to achieve what I aspired to be. So we were lower income, moved a number of times, countless schools, started working when I was 13, whether it was stuffing envelopes, you know, sewing, ironing, cleaning houses, I would do anything starting at the age of 13. Paid my way through college, you know, whether it was my job, grants, student loans, I paid my way through college. And whether it was part-time or full-time jobs at every break. So I learned a lot about hard work, and I've been doing that since I was 13. So independence, hard work, perseverance. So after graduating from college, I was very committed to, you know, what job would I get that has a path? And I loved math, and that's sort of why I went into the finance accounting world. And growing up in San Francisco, I was inspired by the skyline of all the large financial institutions. So I graduated from college, worked for a public accounting firm, put in a lot of hours, a lot of work at an early part of my career, earned my CPA. I worked my way through manager at KPMG. And let me say that I had also met my husband during college. I think that's critical because he was an extremely supportive person for me through this whole journey. And I think it's important that we have others around us, that we surround ourselves as we go through this journey that we have. At KPMG, I specialized in banking. And at some point I moved to Golden One in 1994. So I've been there a very long time. I was vice president controller. We were a much smaller institution at that time, about 1.5 billion. Worked my way from vice president controller, a few years later to CFO. It's all about the opportunities and being in the right place. But we also create our opportunities through independence, hard work, and so forth. I became CEO in 2010. And I would say I grew up with Golden One as well. You know, as Golden One grew from 1.5 billion, we're now 18 billion. We went from being more located in Sacramento to statewide. You know, I've grown up with Golden One. I've been sort of one and the same, it seems, these last 10 years. And so that's the highlights of my journey. And during that, I raised 2 kids. I have a son who's 28 and a daughter who's 25, who I'm very proud of. So that's my story as sort of a foundation.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thanks, Stacey, and thank you, Donna, for sharing your story. Also, my thanks to Marcie and CalPERS for bringing us together today, because while we may be the folks on this panel, we will also learn from each other and the questions that we receive from the audience. A little different than Donna. My career I've had a bit of a zigzag over the course of the last 20 to 25 years. I think we've used the word career ladder, and Marcie's introduced me to a new term, which is career lattice, and that's what my career looks like. Like Donna, I'm different than Donna. I am product of a single mother, grew up in Kansas, and went to the University of Kansas. I stumbled my way into the business school program. Graduated with a business degree and immediately went to work for AT&T in sales and marketing, which was a terrific entry-level management starting opportunity for me. And AT&T was very much at that time a career ladder type of organization, that we refer to ourselves as a cradle to grave type of organization. But 11 years into the cradle, I had some different opportunities, and what happened for me was AT&T called and said, the good news is that we value you as an employee and an aspiring manager. The different news is that we want you to relocate, and we want you to go to New Jersey or Chicago. I thought those were interesting cities, but I enjoyed my home in Indianapolis at the time. So I actually left the company and decided to, I took a buyout package. And I had always wanted to go to law school, and I thought there's nothing like being in my early 30s and going back to school full time. So there I found myself in law school, trying to figure out what were the nouns and what were the verbs in the different sentences and all the things we were reading. But I enjoyed my law school experience, graduated, and went to work practicing for a very large firm in Indianapolis with about 300 lawyers. Interesting, while it had a very strong complement and a growing complement of women attorneys, there were only 2 attorneys, including myself, of color at the time. But like Donna talked about, you put your head down. I learned from every partner I could learn how to be a good lawyer. And then I got another knock on the door, and it was because I had met a newly elected mayor while he was campaigning for office. And I continued to run into him in the course of the campaign cycle. And so November 1999, he is elected mayor of the 13th largest city in the country. And 2 weeks later, I get a phone call at the law firm saying, the mayor-elect would like to meet with you to talk about your interest in the public sector. It was really fascinating to me because I hadn't expressed any interest in the public sector. My entire career had been in the private sector, and that's where I thought I would end up as a partner at a great law firm. Well, 3 months later, January 2000, I'm walking into City Hall as the director of the Department of Metropolitan Development. It's a small agency, only a staff of 200, with a budget of about 30 million, an annual budget of about 30 million a year. That was a great experience for me. I finished the next 4 years as a deputy mayor in Indianapolis. But I began to think about what's the next move for me. If I want to move up in leadership ranks, the mayor was going to be there for a while. What were my other options? And so I considered going back to my law firm. And then I also realized that, I had an interest in the law. I had an interest in cities now and what cities do in our communities. And I had quite a bit of leadership experience. So I decided to relocate to Washington, D.C. Went back to my old law firm, new city, and now I'm a lobbyist for cities in the nation's capital. A year and a half later, somebody taps on, I get another one of those phone calls, and they said, hey, there's this organization called the National League of Cities. And we think with your city experience, with your lobbying experience, with your legal experience, that we have an opportunity that would interest you. So I left, I moved again laterally, and I went to serve as the legislative director for the National League of Cities. It was a great experience for 11 years working with Congress, the administration, and the courts. And in 2016, I had the opportunity to become CEO of this organization in California. So it was interesting when I first got that phone call, because the recruiters were calling me to ask me for suggestions for folks who might be interested in this position. And then he said, well, what about you? And I said, that's interesting, but I live in Washington, D.C., not in Sacramento, California, a place I'd never seen before. And about 3 months later, I was finding a place to live in Sacramento, California. But it's been, if I look back on my career, quite a few zigzags, but I think it's been, for me, a very good blend of the skills and the interest that I have. I think it also reflects that while you sometimes have to move laterally to move up, you also have to be willing to take on new and different assignments that maybe you've never done before. And while I certainly have not been a substantive expertise in so much that I have done, I think over the course of a career, I have developed leadership skills that have been transferable. And I'm proud to say I love Sacramento as home. So there you go, Stacey.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Carolyn. Doreen?
Yes, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Marcie, for putting this panel together. It's so interesting to hear all the women and their journeys. And mine is similar to Donna's and Carolyn's in some degree. My father, H. Frank Dominguez, started Banner in 1964. He started with a duplex, leveraged that to a fourplex, leveraged that to an apartment building, and then constructed the largest building in downtown San Bernardino. It was a 9-story building. He also was the founder of the construction management industry, an industry that just started at that time. In 2004, my father passed away with a massive heart attack, and I took over at that time. But let me go backwards a little bit. During the time that he was growing his career, it was a family business in all respects. My mother cleaned the apartments as we leased them. I had a brother a year younger than me and a sister with Down syndrome, who I currently sit on the board of Pride Industries, where we get people with disabilities jobs, and it's headquartered here in the greater Sacramento area as well. Because my mom had Diane at age 40 and could not participate, I was my dad's partner in many respects, in going to fundraisers, going to events, going to community participations with I was the first female to be on the parking commissioner in San Bernardino as well, when I graduated from the University of Notre Dame, after I graduated. But again, very humble beginnings initially. But in 2004, my father passed away of a massive heart attack. And there I was promoted as CEO. It was on a Friday that I had breakfast with him. On a Saturday, Friday we had breakfast. That afternoon, that Friday, he passed away. Monday, I had to call a board meeting, letting the company know of 400 employees. It was heart-wrenching and difficult, but at the same time, it was huge shoes to fill. But at the same time, the employees, the board, gave me their confidence, and I was able to really grow this company even in a larger way. We got into industries that we weren't in before. Today, Vanner is 34th in the nation according to Engineering News and Record. That is amazing statistic, but we are #1 as a woman-owned company and as a Hispanic-owned company, according to Engineering News and Record. And I'm very proud of those records. It's very important as a CEO and promoting women in my industry that is all male. One of my projects that I'm very excited about is Valleywise. It's a $1.3 billion hospital project, and 82% of our staff are women on that project. In a male-dominant industry, that's unheard of. But I don't do it because it's important to promote women. I do it because it's good business. And I, again, applaud Marcie Frost for putting this together, because this is good business. And we do things because of good business, but with women weighing in, it's so important in order to change the landscape of all industries. But back to my story. But now I'm CEO. I sit on several boards, KB, as we mentioned, Douglas Emmett, which we didn't mention. And then also I'm the first governor, Latina governor, to be a part of the NBA. And I'm so proud to be part of the Sacramento Kings, homegrown here in Sacramento. That story is interesting because it was really a real estate play in which I got involved with the Sacramento Kings. Kevin Johnson was the mayor at the time. And if you remember, Steve Ballmer was going to go ahead and purchase the Kings. He actually had more money than we did. We put together 30 investors. And the reason we were able to, that David Stern chose Sacramento to keep Sacramento, or the Sacramento Kings to stay in Sacramento, was because we had already installed the entitlements in Sacramento. And when Steve Ballmer outbid us, the fact that we had a new arena coming up in Sacramento, downtown, and I'm proud to say that Golden One was a participant in that, was able to keep the Kings here and provide economic development to our dear Sacramento city. But that is my story, and I look forward to the questions of our audience later on.
Oh, thank you, Doreen. Kate?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say it's fantastic to hear all of the stories and to hear everybody's leadership journey. And a big thank you, Marcie, and to CalPERS for doing this. I think it's a wonderful way to support women in their development and share different ideas. I would say my journey is very based in learning. I was born while my parents were at UC Davis, so they were going to college, and I was born between their junior and senior year, and I pretty much spent my first couple of years just traveling around in a backpack. They were definitely hippies, so this was the 60s. And I would say learning continued to be a theme throughout my journey. I started at BSP, as you shared, Stacey. I've been there about 30 years, and I started right out of college. I also went to Davis, so go Aggies, and right out of college started in BSP sales department. And I would just say, back to learning, starting in the sales or the market facing department in any company is such a great way to learn about the business. I learned all about our customers. I learned a ton from the sales team who was dealing with customers and changes in the marketplace. And then as VSP grew, similar to Donna sharing her journey, I grew and I learned, and my role eventually turned into a marketing role as we expanded a formal marketing function. And I was VSP's first chief marketing officer. And I actually received my first promotion into that executive role when I was on maternity leave. So a completely different story, but I think an important one for this forum today, just supporting women during different milestones in their lives. And I didn't come right back from maternity leave. I took a 4-month leave with each of my kids. So anyway, as I continued in my career, VSP continued to grow, and we acquired other businesses, and I had the opportunity to be the chief marketing officer across all of our global businesses. I'm learning all about every aspect of eye care and eyewear, from frames to lenses to even practice management that optometrists use in their offices, and certainly the insurance business where I started. And when I started, we, Stacey, you mentioned it in the introduction, that we did business in 3 states. Today, we're obviously national. We cover close to 90 million people for their eye care and eyewear benefits, so 1 in 4. And we also, just from a growth standpoint, if you look revenue, when I started, we were about 200 million. Today, the insurance division is just over 5 billion. So along the way, I've learned to adapt. I've learned to be able to learn from others around me. And the best part of, I think, being part of an organization like VSP is, even as we've changed and adapted over the 3 decades I've been at VSP, there's some certain DNA or a thread that has stayed consistent around being people-centric and very focused on our purpose of empowering human potential through sight. And that's one of the reasons I love my job, and I love to be able to continue to advance that mission. And today I'm in the president's role. I moved into this role 6 years ago, and it was like coming back home, because leading the insurance part of the business is where I started. So that's been fantastic to be able to collaborate with so many people to continue to grow our footprint. And then lastly, I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, which 2 kids, after the woman on the video who shared she has 5 kids, it made me feel like my 2 are way easier than having 5. So that was very impressive. And that is my journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Mary?
Well, thank you. It is an honor to be here with all of these amazing, accomplished women. So thank you to Marcie and Stacey for putting this together. I'm excited to be in. I grew up in Sacramento. I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, and we were raised by a single dad whose main message to us was always that we could do anything the boys could do. So that was kind of a theme. And the way we could do that was really by making the most of whatever opportunities you had. So that was one of those things like, you know, why do I need to take math? Well, I don't know yet, but you have to keep your options open. So that's what you're doing. Or why does it matter if I get an A in health? I have to keep your options open. So it was a real thing about you keep your options open, the more you take advantage of what you have in front of you. So went to Harvard from here, and then down to DC, actually following a boy, which my dad was appalled. He's like, we sent you to Harvard and you're following a boy to DC. So the boy didn't last, but happily I had a great job in DC and worked for a technology consulting firm for a couple of years. Learned a lot about systems, and also felt like there's other ways to solve business problems besides systems, but I'm not learning them. And one of those things where when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Okay, everything cannot necessarily be solved with technology. So I went back to Harvard Business School and graduated from there in '98 and went off to work for Bain, which is an outstanding strategy consulting firm in San Francisco. So again, learning a ton from our clients. You know, people bring such interesting business problems to the table, and finding out not only how do you identify a good answer and solve a problem, but also how do you let people know what is the good answer, communicate, persuade, help people understand what are the critical elements of the decision. Those were all really great pieces of Bain.
But really wanted to make my way back to Sacramento. And I got the opportunity when one of my friends started a company called Power School. Some of you who are parents might have seen that system because it's still used mostly in K through 12 school systems, which is terrific. So I worked for Power School, and we were acquired by Apple, so got to work for Apple, which was wonderful. You know, as director of product strategy back in the day, it was like the turn of this century. So it was long, long ago, back before the internet was so predominant, was working on what is our electronic data interchange format going to be and all this fun stuff. And at that point, my uncle, who is the CEO of Tigert, came and asked if I would consider joining what is my family's business. So my great-great-grandfather started Tigert back in 1887. He was a foreman for the guy who invented expansion joints and hung out his shingle when we built the state capitol in Sacramento, and he built the sidewalks around the state capitol. So it was about as far from Apple as you could get. You know, I owned one pair of jeans and I'd never worked in this business. But I was in, you know, I believe in the values of the company and I believe in the community that we build. So I started in the quality assurance lab because I didn't really know anything about this, and learned how to make a good rock, and worked in a rock plant for a couple of years, you know, hard hat and boots. And I was the only person in my alumni magazine with a safety vest. I was kind of proud of that. Worked in aggregate sales, worked in our takeoff department in construction, was a project engineer. So basically I've had about 13 jobs since I've been at Tigert, because each of them is really necessary to understand what we do for a living and how we make money. And kind of going back to just making the most of the opportunities that you have. It's not one of those things where you sort of like, this is not a path I could ever have drawn up and said, oh, I know, let's go work for Bain and then Apple, and then I'll come work in a construction company. But really doing a good job of whatever you are doing, I think, is what made this possible, because I'd been achieving in the jobs I'd had, is why my uncle thought of asking me, which frankly, in retrospect, I think sometimes about kind of how kind of open-minded and expansive it was of him to do that, because there are not very many women in construction businesses, and certainly very few that are running them. And our business is heavy civil. We do roads and streets and underground. So it's really, I think there's about 1% women in the field, about 6% women in operations in our industry. So we're blessed with about 33% overall when you include things like HR and finance, but in the kind of frontline P&L jobs, it's about 6% women. So I just think that's really, what a blessing that he thought of me and wanted me to do this. And so it's been a terrific experience, and I learned something every day. I think, you know, kind of picking up on where Donna started this, as far as being in the right place and making the most of your opportunities, it's been a good ride. I do have 2 boys who are fabulous. They're 18 and 15, and we'll see what they become, you know, kind of, I'm trying to convey that piece about make the most of the opportunities that you have. And some days they do and some days they don't, but I'm completely crazy about them. So that part's fun as well. So thanks for having me.
Wow, it's been great. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to the next question. What was the greatest advice you received that helped shape you as a person and your career?
Wow. I think I'll take that one first, Stacey. And I'm so inspired by the stories from our panelists today. Just amazing. Like so many of you, I've received a lot of advice over the years. And you know, what I learned early on is that when you're interviewing for jobs and positions, it's not only the company that's trying to decide whether or not you'll be a good fit for them, but it's also really, really important that you interview the company, decide whether or not their culture, their people, their systems are going to be a good fit for you. I try to remember today that, and even when I was considering moving across the country to a city where I didn't know anyone, and Doreen, we grew up with the Kansas City Kings before Sacramento stole them so many years ago. But I like to think about, is it a place where I'll feel supported, where I can be supported so I can be successful? Will I find the work meaningful? Does the work matter that I'll be doing? And then finally, will the work challenge and inspire me? And so to all the folks out there looking for advice today, that would be mine. Make sure that you're interviewing the organization as well as the organization interviewing you.
That's great. Thank you, Carolyn. Any others?
I think also as you're interviewing those organizations, also to think big, to think outside the box, not to be constrained by perceived limits. Many times as women, we think that we're not at the table or at the that we're invited at the table. But I think we need to step up, knock on the door, and be present. It's really important that we see ourselves in those board rooms. We see ourselves as CEOs. We see ourselves. So I would say, think big, know that there aren't any limitations and that you can do it.
I think that is, yeah, thank you. I'll definitely chime in. I think those two pieces of advice already given are great. The one I would add is I think one of the best pieces of advice I got that was also, I think, a stress reliever too, is that I didn't have to have all the answers. And I think that's really important for us to understand as leaders, that we don't have to have all the answers. And I think there's that great saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, you haven't hired well, right? Because you should be hiring people around you to have a team that has diversity of thought and perspectives and brings things that I don't bring, that we don't bring as leaders. And so that was a really important piece of advice that I think has certainly impacted me and resulted in me hiring people way smarter than me with different skills that they can bring to the table for a really strong team.
That's very true. Mary?
Yeah, I guess I'd pick up and say that I feel like it's super important, and I've appreciated the advice to do something you love. I think, I don't love it every single day, but I'd say most days I absolutely love my job and I love what we do. And I think feeling as though you have some purpose and some connection to the outcome of your work is really critical. I would just add that I don't know very many people who hate their jobs that are great at them. There's some connection between liking what you do and being good at it. So I would, if you're miserable most days, I would definitely find something else to do. And if you love it every day, that's actually the really most important thing, because life is short and you need to do something that you really enjoy. So I feel like that's a key one.
Well, if I could add too, I'll add that, there's a saying that you shouldn't not do something because it's going to take too long or be too hard, because time's going to pass anyway. And so I extend that concept to much of life, personally and professionally. Too many people give up on things because they think, oh, that's going to take too long. And then 2 years will come and it would have been done had they already done it. And so you don't want to have a life where you look back with disappointments. Put in the hard work. I always say if it was easy, everyone would do it. So the point is, you got to do the hard work to get where you want to go and achieve your dreams. Be your own best advocate. And the idea of do something today, which you're doing, that your future self will thank you for.
Wow, such a great insight. I really appreciate this. Can you share one challenge and lesson learned that helped you grow?
I'll go ahead and take that one. As I mentioned in my journey, my parents were not educated, and I had a teacher that took some interest in me, that I was able to, she formed me so that I would go to college. She encouraged me to go to college. And I applied to the University of Notre Dame. And there, again, I have had many challenges with my dad passing away and so forth, but I want to bring this one up, is that when I went to the University of Notre Dame, my grandparents were against it. They're against it because they felt that I was a woman, I was a Latina, that I should stay close to home. My father was very excited that I was accepted to the university. And when I got to Notre Dame, there were a lot of people that did not look like me. I was one of the first women in my class, because Notre Dame was an all-boys school at one time. And I had majored in business finance, and and then also my ethnicity. Being a Latina was also a gift, I'll say. And what I learned was that as unique human beings, being a Latina, at the Fighting Irish School, I was able to share my culture, my thoughts, my ideas, and they were well received because they were different. It was a different perspective. And I think as women, we offer that in many ways to our industries. I'm in male dominant industry, that different perspective. So that challenge initially was, I'm afraid because no one looks like me and no one came from an underserved community at the time. But now I see that as a great advantage. And so I think every adversity, there is a opportunity. And so with adversity, it is a gift, and you can learn from it, and it is golden.
I can build on that. I would love to just add to what Doreen shared, just around what different perspectives can bring, and women especially can bring into organizations. When I think of a challenge, I'm going to go more recently with the pandemic. Obviously has been a huge challenge for all of us, and has probably been one of my biggest learning opportunities. Just obviously none of us have had to navigate anything like the pandemic before. And in my role, just knowing that here we have VSP, we were just celebrating our 65th birthday, and wanted to make certain that we were around and sustainable, for another 65 years and beyond. And so a ton of different business challenges that we were navigating, as everyone was. And certainly the toll it took on team members, the toll it took on our clients, our members that we cover under our programs. And I would say one of my learnings, and not to say that it wasn't something I already knew, but maybe just further reinforced it, is how important it is to lead with heart and empathy and compassion for each other, whether it's team members or external stakeholders, and even with ourselves, to give ourselves compassion and grace in difficult times. And I think, not to say that's not something that both genders can bring to an organization, but I think there are times, at least in my career, that I have felt like, well, I need to lead more as I see the males leading, or maybe I shouldn't show as much heart, or shouldn't show as much empathy, or, lead in a different way. And I think one of my biggest learnings is how powerful leading with heart is. And that's something that is natural for me and can be natural for many women, and important for us to bring that and leverage that and be proud that we can lead in a different way.
I kind of pick up on that as far as lessons that I've gotten from challenges. There are certainly dozens. One of the ones that I thought might be worth talking about today is that this question of how do we get more women interested in our industry? And that's from the space of being in one that has historically not got very many. So I know not everybody's industry is equally like that. But in our case, trying to think of how do you get people interested in your industry? The challenge in construction is that there aren't a lot of women in the pipeline. So on the one hand, that's one place to let ourselves off the hook and say, well, we're hiring who there is available. And then the other side is that that's not sufficient. And so I'd say the challenge myself is feeling like most of my career is harken back to the early lessons from my dad, that you can do anything the boys can do, and thinking we have the same job the men do, which is we have to run an excellent operation and be good at our jobs. But then when I got to be chief operating officer, looking around and realizing, but yes, and there aren't any women, there just aren't any, and who's in a better position to address it than I am. So I guess I have to take this one on and figure out what is it. And so it's been interesting because it requires peeling the onion a few layers deeper as to what are all the different causes that make women not choose this industry. And I kind of have two pieces of it. One is, how can I have the women that are there choose Tykert, which I feel like we're pretty blessed that way. We do get a great number of women that are out there. And then two is, how do we get more women to choose this industry so that we are getting better access to talent across the entire spectrum. And so I'd say it's not a challenge I'm done with, but I would say one of the points in my mind, well, two of the points. One is trying to figure out how do you kind of reach your hand out to other people who are coming through the ranks behind wherever you are. And I would say that to pretty much anybody. So if you're, a senior in high school, there's a freshman somewhere, or if you're out of college, there's a college kid somewhere, or in my position, there's a whole lot of women thinking about what do they want to do with their lives that I potentially could give some advice or help to. So trying to think about how can I reach out to folks who are at some place that I have something to offer and be part of their journey. That's an important piece. And then two is even if the problem seems intractable, like how do we get women to think about construction as a business? There's somewhere to start. It kind of picks up on Donna's point about life's going to pass anyway. I've always liked that piece about the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is today. So we have to go out and plant some trees. And so trying to figure out how do I get after it, even if it's a difficult problem, is kind of an ongoing challenge that I learn from, I think, every day.
If I could add to that, the comments that were made. And before we started, there was a video about work-life balance, and we heard from some of the participants about the challenges of raising a family and working. So for me, my greatest challenge was motherhood, the work-life balance that I had to go through. But I will have to say, I've gone through it. My kids are now 28 and 25, and it can be done. So I would say motherhood is probably the greatest challenge. But you know what? I learned my greatest lessons about leadership as a mother. I learned to practice composure. I learned to practice compassion, empathy. I learned because my children were honest. They'd tell me when I wasn't doing well, right? I loved it. It was hard at the time, but they would tell me when, Mom, you're just not listening. And they're right. We have to learn to listen. And I didn't always do that very well. And so I learned to know when it's time to give advice and when it's really time just to be a supportive ear and listen. So I would say that was probably my greatest challenge, and I learned my greatest lessons, because as a leader, we're going to manage through a lot of crises in the workplace, a lot of difficulties. And one thing we need to do as a leader is we don't want to join in the chaos. We want to be able to be calm, and we want to be able to lead people through it and give them the encouragement that we can get through it and get through on the other side, and we'll come out better than we started.
Wow. Stacey, what I'd have to add to all these great comments is just remembering that I can't be a leader if I don't have anybody following me or anybody who wants to follow me. And I think something Kate said about the pandemic, we are in uncharted territory. And I think that also gives us a very unique opportunity to craft a new playbook on work and life and how you bring it all together. And I think it will necessarily, which is exciting, draw upon some of the skills that as women and those competencies, leadership competencies that as women come a little more naturally for us. Also, I'd say that, as Mary talked about, we need more women, and certainly more women of color in the public sector in leadership positions. And fortunately, there are a number of great programs around the country helping to develop that pipeline. And I think that while I don't have daughters, I do have daughters who I've been mentoring over the course of 20 years who have been in those programs and gone on to careers in the public sector. And I suspect that all of us have some element of, while we do the work and balance many things, we also appreciate the importance of reaching back.
Oh, great, thank you. We're going to move on to our next question. What advice would you give to a young person that you wish you would have received early in your career?
I can take that one. I would say take more risks. I wish someone had told me as a young professional, go move somewhere else. Go, take that job. If you, don't like it, you can always change paths. I'm fortunate that where I started ended up being a wonderful place for me, and California has been wonderful. And so I certainly have had a fantastic career with the journey I've had, but I wish someone had told me just try other things early on, especially when you're of that age, right out of college. I think often we don't know what we don't know as far as opportunities or things we might like as professions. And until we try some of those, we don't find out. And I think too, along the same lines, that idea of being okay, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so I think as a young person, I wish someone had told me, take more risks. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel, like you don't want to do it, but that's exactly the reason you should do it. So that would be what I would have liked to have heard.
I think that's a good one. I guess one of the pieces that is related to that, probably to your point, Kate, on being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I guess I'm pretty happy actually with how the whole journey's gone, but I think a piece that would have maybe been additional would be if I had thought more often, like, why not? Like, why not do that? I think one of the kind of comments that I hear in different circles about a way that women sometimes handicap ourselves is by feeling like we have to be overqualified for the next job by the time we apply for it or ask for it, relative to, I think there's a slightly statistically higher comfort level with men on stuff that maybe they're 60% ready for, and saying, hey, I can take on a stretch assignment. I'm not sure I have all those parts, but I could probably develop them. So I think that's a place where probably myself and other women that I've come across or had the good fortune to mentor, I feel like we'll give it a try. Who better? You look around and see that there's opportunities that you're interested in, that you have at least some of the qualifications for. Why not? So failure can happen, I think, as long as you pay attention and are respectful and, also recognize your limitations, give it a shot, I think would be my main thing.
I would add to that, about, I wish I worried less. I wish someone had told me, worry less about the things you have no control over. There's a lot of things in our lives that we don't have control over, and it only robs you of your peace and time that could have been used for better things, to help grow you as an individual. So I spent a lot of time worrying. I wish I'd used it differently. We all get to we don't get to control what happens sometimes, but we do get to choose how we respond. I think that's really important. We need to know that very early on. We get to choose how we respond, not worry, and realize sometimes things are happening and you just don't realize that it will work out in your favor. You have to believe in that. And even though it's difficult, know that it will work out, and worry less.
Okay, I think I think regardless of where you're at in life, it's important to give back to others. And the best way to sharpen up your skills is to mentor somebody else. I do a lot of mentoring. I enjoy mentoring, but when you mentor, it's reverse mentoring as well. I learn a lot from them. And so that would be one of the advices that I would give is, mentor someone, give back. Also, don't get discouraged. As someone mentioned about the COVID, everyone should learn from this year of COVID that we don't all have the right answers. And the worst answer is not trying at all. So don't get discouraged. Just give it your all, try your best. And those are my advices.
We're going to move on to the next question just because we're running out of time and I want to make sure we get to all these questions. What is your outlook for the future? Get your crystal ball out. What will the landscape be for women in leadership 10 to 20 years from now?
Hey, Stacey, I'll start with that one. I'm a glass half full kind of person, so I'm excited about the future. And it is my hope that in 10 to 20 years, we're not still celebrating the first woman, this or that we have done our work between now and the next 20 years, that we've built up, as Mary's talked about, sufficient pipelines so that we have, in fact, we know we do today, but we have more folks recognizing that the pool of competitive women for leadership positions is plentiful. That's my hope.
I can just add to that. I completely echo your hope, and I do have it. I think we continue to grow that pipeline. I certainly hope and expect to see more women leading Fortune 500 companies. I think that from a CEO standpoint, we need a lot more women. And that means that women today taking on, one other piece of advice I would have is taking on more P&L roles to be able to be responsible for the financial aspects of companies. And I think, Mary, that goes back to the math, right? Because we need more women in those types of roles to be able to be leaders of companies across the US and the world.
Well, I totally hope that also. And to your point on math, you know, I'm optimistic that a lot of the focus now on STEM programs and on people getting more exposure to science, technology, math, engineering, it goes back to creating options. So it doesn't mean you have to have a job that only uses those parts, but I think there's a whole lot of opportunity available if you have a bit of quantitative capability. And I think a lot of women haven't necessarily prepared themselves in that way for whatever comes across next. So my hope is that we're going to keep getting more and more deep and better STEM education. And the other thing we're going to have to figure out somehow is how we're going to take good care of kids. I mean, I was blessed when my kids were little that their father wanted to stay home with them, because otherwise I'm not sure how that we would have done this, or how I could have accomplished what I've accomplished. But honestly, you know, our children are amazing and someone has to take care of them. And how are we going to figure that out? And I feel like that's a problem that we have as a society, because it's precluding access to talent because women can't do this. And we have to figure that out. So I'm hoping in the next 10 or 20 years, we'll come up with it. And I don't exactly know what it looks like yet. And I think there's probably pieces of extended family and pieces of childcare and pieces of how job arrangements are set up so that people can manage more than one thing. But somehow we have to figure out better solutions for how we can raise families and also manage to be like massive contributors in a professional setting. So that's my hope.
I'm also positive on the outlook. I think women are natural born leaders personally. And as we move forward, we've already seen a lot of change in the last 10, 20, 30 years. And I've experienced that. And I'm seeing the pace at which it's picking up. And it's definitely the tools and technology that exists and will continue to come are simplifying our lives and helping us to be able to manage a lot of responsibilities at the same time. So I think there's great opportunities for us as women. We'll have more role models to be able to manage a lot of responsibilities and work-life balance.
I agree with all of you, but I would take one step further. I think it's necessary in order to fulfill the roles, not just motherhood, but the boardroom, political leadership, in order to make America a better place, to make the world a better place. We women need to lean in, help others, get on these boards, get political positions to provide that perspective that is greatly needed in our world politics and our world board meetings and our world companies, so that we can be a better community.
That's great. Thank you. And now to end us on a high note, what are your favorite quotes about leadership?
Well, I'll share one that I've used sometimes in our Women in Operations program at Tiger, where one of the questions is, why are we focusing all the time on women's issues? Because on the one hand, we have a million business issues to deal with, and they're very pressing. And two is that we have amazing men that are contributors and great allies and the centerpiece of how our business runs. So a piece I often quote is Warren Buffett said, part of the reason for his success is he only had to compete with half the population. And I'm like, okay, the whole population needs to be interested in somehow doing something that engages their talents and gives them a way to contribute at work. And that's where the boat's gonna rise for everybody. If we have all the talented people that want to do these jobs actually in there doing it. So that's a good reason to keep moving the ball forward.
That is a great quote. I'll just share, mine would be, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, which I just think speaks to whether you're thinking of it takes a village to run a company or even to parent a family. I mean, back to Mary, what you were saying around raising kids.
I have a quote that I've blown up in my office as a daily reminder to me, and it's a quote from Thomas Jefferson, which is, if you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. And I need that as a reminder as we make difficult decisions that's the whole point, right? If we want something we've never had, we have to do something differently that we've never done before.
Mine is Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
And mine, I firmly believe that giving back and investing in our community is very important. So the quote that I like best is, "You make a living by what you get, you make a life by what you give," by William Churchill.
Wow, these are wonderful quotes. I'm actually going to add one too, not by anyone famous. It's from my grandmother, Rebecca Perez, and it's, "No one can take what is in your mind." And that's something that motivated me to learn over the years and recognize that if I don't belong, I have to create a place for myself to belong and for others to belong. So thank you so much. This has been a fascinating discussion. I hope all those watching learned as much as I did about succeeding as a leader. Next up, we have the final installment of our leadership career conversations today, followed by a few remarks from CalPERS CEO Marcie Frost. And then you're about to hear from Linda Yang, who was the first woman in 1977 to serve on the CalPERS board. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're honored to have Ambassador Yang join us for today's session. And I'd like to share a little bit about Linda and her background with the audience before we get started with our interview. So President Clinton appointed you to serve as the U.S. Executive Director of the Asian Development Bank. You were the first woman and first Asian American woman to represent the United States on the board of a multilateral financial institution. Earlier in your career, you were the first woman appointed by California's Governor Jerry Brown to serve as a California Savings and Loan Commissioner. And even more special to us, which is a real privilege for me to get to have this conversation with you today, you were the first woman and the first Asian American woman to serve on the CalPERS Board of Administration. In all your work, you have worked to improve equal opportunities for women, widening the path for all of us who follow in your footsteps. So we thank you for that. And now, if you are okay, I'd like to ask you just a few questions about your particular pathway and your journey. So maybe we could just start with, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, thank you so much, Marcie. You know, as I say, I never would dream that after 40 years leaving CalPERS board, that I've been given such a warm welcome home. You know, I always felt once you are a part of CalPERS, you're always a part of CalPERS. But still, it such warms my heart that I get such a wonderful come back home to join all of you. Well, actually, you know, I was often asked, Linda, how come your path is so zip-zap? You know, you never expect your 10 years, you're full at-home housewife, another 6 years, you're an ambassador. How did you manage? What happened? I said, well, actually, my career path has never been planned. When I was 10 years old, in my family, when a girl becomes 10, it's a very important birthday. Not only you get beautiful clothes, everything else. My mother told me, said, because now you are no longer a child, you're going to adolescence, and then you're going to be a young lady. Okay. But remember, wealth, fame, they don't count. What counts is what you make of your life. That counts. What you make of your life, that counts. She also said to me, your life did not begin the day you were born. Of course, I was totally amazed. Why? Because in you, generations of your ancestors have embedded in you a certain values, certain kind of how you should conduct yourself, how you make of your life. And then I remember she said, she raised her hand. She said, you know, you are a link. You are a link. You transmit what your ancestors, people were way before you, in you. You add to the positive that you can, what you do with your life, to someone, to the next link. Life is an endless chain. You are a link in that chain. So what you make of your life, make sure you add something positive. You pass on. So that's what I learned from my mother. So whenever I have a twist or turn in my life, I always have that beacon of light from the lighthouse, and the lighthouse is my mother.
That's wonderful. So I'd like to, that you've always, so I've met you a few times, and this piece about being positive and having a North Star, being true to your ethics, really resonates with me as well. So your mother obviously was the inspiration for your career, but maybe talk a little bit with us about any obstacles you encountered and how you overcame them.
Well, I think, again, my mother always says, don't let other people define who you are, whether it's positive or negative. You define yourself who you are, but be very honest with yourself and be very aware you need to do better. And so since whatever the twist or turn in my life, it's easy for me to follow the right path. That's the beacon of light from my mother. That is to say, life is not by seeking fame, not seeking wealth, but make sure you make your life such that somehow adds a little more positive for others. And so I've been very fortunate in my life that I have that beacon of light in the right direction all the time. So it's not so difficult for me to choose the right path to follow. So when it was time for me to, say, switch from being a professional young economist to be a full-time mother with 2 young children, I know for that period of my life, this is something I must pay attention. But later on, when my children are older, some opportunities came up. Okay, I could do it. So I often, when I share my experience with the younger people, I said, no one can have everything all at once. You have to know a certain period of your life, you can contribute more positively for certain things, but always be prepared for the next step. As my mother said, opportunity is how you created yourself. Opportunity is how you create yourself. And always be prepared when the call comes.
Yeah, I really liked, along with being positive, but being prepared and looking to the future in a positive way, that, if you keep that true north in mind, that the obstacles really don't get in your way, as long as you keep that attitude about success and about helping others. So when you think about, women in the workplace, what do you see as the primary benefits of having females in the workplace?
Well, look, half of the population are women, right? There's so much talent and wisdom. If we don't provide equal opportunity for women, you are denying the whole humanity, the whole country, of the source of the talent, energy, wisdom. And so whenever I have an opportunity, I always put forward my suggestions. Say, look, when I was at ADB, 800 professionals, only 53 women are professionals. Among 2,000 supporting staff, 1,800 were women. So I said, we're here to help the developing countries, and half of them are women. We need women on senior level. Make sure they can go out, they can understand, they can interact, come back, they can make the program that much more meaningful and realistic. May I tell you a story about that? Because I remember one particular program was one of the Muslim countries. And in certain areas, women are not allowed to talk to strangers. So in the formulation of the program, we have to send people on site to look around. I think it's an irrigation project, okay? We have one woman, fortunately, on that team. When it came back, I asked, I said, any different, what kind of questions? This one woman said, there were two questions she was asked. One, how far is the distance between they can go down to the, to get the water from the irrigation, where they had to walk 5 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile. Number two, the question is how high the burn so that children will not fall into the water, get drowned. Men never ask that kind of question. So when this certainly was inputted in the design of that project, and the whole community, not just the women, not just children, the whole community where we try to help benefit from it. So I always frame the question, say, about making improvements, opportunities, that is for the very purpose why we are here, why we do this, why is it better for the organization. I always put it that way. Mm-hmm. Number two, I benefited from many who came before me. As my mother said, your path already been made much easier for you to walk because people ahead of you remove the boulders and the rocks. So remember, you do something for others. So whenever I find some younger women, I will make sure I always have my lunch in the cafeteria rather than in the executive dining room. And I take my tray, go around and sit and talk to people. I find some younger women with not just younger, middle age, they're so good, so bright, so knowledgeable. I'll come back, I will try to get them involved in whatever I do or suggest to my colleague, hey, I met so-and-so, she's to be very good at that. Would you like to talk to her and see maybe you can include her as one of your team? Of course, they have to prove themselves afterwards.
Right.
So I think for many of us who have somehow climbed up, we have a responsibility to lend a hand. As I say, Mama, we are a link for those before us and that come after us.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. So when you're taking your food tray to the cafeteria table, what kind of advice are you giving to those women who want to be leaders in their own field?
Well, I won't say I get advice, but when we talk about it, well, particularly younger women, they have children and, they feel very pressed, try to do a good job at an office, but the child is sick at home, I mean, I myself experienced that. I know how it is like. So I will always say there are times maybe caring for your children is more important. Or sometimes giving a hand to your husband has more priority, okay? It all depends. As I say, you cannot have all at the same time. However, even if you feel that you can cut back your professional aspirations, but always be prepared when the opportunity comes, when you can go back into it. So over time, even for the 10 years, I was 100% at home mother and wife. I still keep up with the people I know who are experts. And on Friday afternoons, I'll have a babysitter close my door. As I'm told the boys fight, get bloody, don't ever knock at my door. That one afternoon is my time. I'll try to keep up the reading, writing letters to friends who are still in the professions, and, keep on studying. So I try to keep myself up. And whenever there's an opportunity of a professional conference or scholarly in San Francisco, I'll make sure I take the train in and spend a day. I think constantly enrich yourself, the knowledge base, as much as you can. Because one day you create an opportunity to say, hey, so-and-so, see whether she's still up to it.
Yeah, I think your point is really to cultivate a very wide network of people, whether those are individuals you meet at university, whether those are individuals you meet throughout your career, but having that diverse set of opinions, and you find yourself in a new role and you need additional resources to help get yourself ramped up, but then you also return it to that same network when those individuals find themselves in that new role. So if you don't mind, I would really like to end our session with you talking a bit more about your CalPERS experience. And I know that it was your idea to have a childcare center here at CalPERS as we were looking to expand our campus. So maybe talk to us a little more about your experience and any other successes that you still feel proud about today.
I remember at that time I was one only woman on the 11-member board. So at the time we were planning, they started to talk to me. And I said, well, first priority is a child care center right on the spot building on the ground floor. Well, all kinds of problems. Well, kids running around, running into the elevator, we don't know anything about child care, all the things. I said, look, we just provide a space. Maybe we get the rent a little cheaper, get the professional child care, people in. It's their responsibility to make sure the kids don't run around in the lobby, okay? And make sure they're professional, they have a good track record. Just think about that. We just perhaps make the space available at somewhat little lower rent. That's all. And I said, well, look, in fact, about 10 years ago, at a conference, I met a person in her early 50s. She told me she's been with CalPERS for 20 years. And I'm sure, I forgot her name, was pretty senior. So she said, one reason she first joined CalPERS was a child care center. She said, now my daughter's already graduated from college. And she chose to stay. One of the opportunities are there. And number two, the child care center really made it possible for her in her early years to build up her work track record, because she does not have to worry about kids and so on. And just to think how many women, talented women, chose to work at CalPERS because there's an on-site child care center. And I must say, my suggestion was very much warmly supported my 10 colleagues on the board who are all men. Do you want me to tell you what the questions I was asked interviewed before I joined CalPERS board?
Yes.
Well, when Governor Brown decided to appoint me to the board, I got interviewed, and about 3 guys came to interview me. And one of the questions I was asked, now, Mrs. Yang, how do you feel with 10 middle-aged white men? And I said, I don't think it's any problem for me. I said, when I was in graduate school, 99.9% were young white men. And in my work and professional career, I would say, perhaps I find a woman 1 out of 10. So I said, it's not a problem for me. But on the other hand, I just wonder how the other 10 guys would feel working a woman of color. But the answer was quite positive. Yes. I think
Child Care Center is still on campus today, and I know many women, if they had the opportunity, would give you a personal thank you for that. As you know, women still to this day are the primary caregivers for children. That is starting to change. We're seeing that in the demographics, but by far, the vast majority of women are still having the primary responsibility for taking care of children. So removing that obstacle to come into the workplace for that female to feel comfortable, you could go over, have lunch with your child, which we have employees who do that. It's wonderful. So on behalf of CalPERS, we really thank you for that great idea.
Don't thank me. No, it's easy to make a suggestion. It's actually people on the ground over the years. If anyone want to thank, that's the crew we need to be grateful for, not me.
Well, I appreciate that, but it has to start with a great idea. I think throughout your career, and as we close this, just having both females as well as males in your professional network, and you called it your zigzag in your career. I love that. We also call that a career lattice. Just spending a number of years in a variety of roles, and has really brought you to this person who provides just great advice to whether it's females for this event or investors in another event. So we really appreciate your time and truly appreciate your service. So Ambassador, it was so great to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for being a part of our event.
Well, thank you so much. Such a warm homecoming for me after 40 years. As I say, once you're part of CalPERS, you're always in your heart is a part of CalPERS. But now this very warm homecoming is I really appreciate it. I want to thank you for it.
So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today for our very first Pathways for Women event. We did set out to bring a group of highly accomplished females together to really talk to you about their own personal journeys, the things that they have learned along the way, really advice that they have been able to either take in or to provide to others. So I do want to thank our fabulous and talented panelists and our moderators. These are brilliant women doing amazing things and really reaching really important outcomes for so many people here in the United States, and also in the Sacramento area with our CEO panel. So I hope we have accomplished your goals when you thought about registering for our event and looking for some advice or tips on how to take that next step in your career. I really hope we were able to give you some good tips on how to do that. Just a couple of takeaways from the event. I really love the zigzag. You heard that from Ambassador Yang. You heard that from CEO Carolyn Coleman. We also call that the career lattice. So I really encourage you to think about your next step in your career. Look to, who is the leader that you really could learn from, that maybe they have accomplished a level of success that is something that you are really looking for in your own career. So I call it follow the leader, but really looking to zigzag or to move across before you get that opportunity to move up and see, the other doors that will be open for you that maybe you don't see on your current journey. So be courageous, whether you see that path or not, be there to carve it out for yourself. The other thing I think Ambassador Yang had said that really resonated with me is don't let other people define who you are. And I know that came, from advice from her own mother, and she's brought that forward and shared it with all of us. So I think that's a really important takeaway for this event as well. My own career, I had several mentors and sponsors. We talked about mentors, sponsors. I think Sarah Cora called it an advocate or an ally. And these are people who have taken their time and shared their own professional networks to help you even to be more successful than you already are. Typically, a mentor or sponsor would not take the time if they didn't see you as that successful person already. So I would encourage you to find those individuals who you respect in your own networks and reach out to them. I guarantee women or men, they would tell you, or they would give you a yes answer to that request. So I do think it's important that we all work together, that we find other ways to lift other women. And when we do, we can all succeed. So with that, everyone, have a good day.